Yeah, I mean, we're talking real life. We're talking to real people about real things, discussing real problems, coming up with real solutions. This is this is our life. This is my life. This is real life. Hello, and this is Cornelius Lindsay with another leadership moment here. Um, I want to talk for just a few minutes about the separated coal. You know, there's this old story about a man. He was sitting down in the living room, and he was sitting there with his mentor, and his mentor asked him. He said, son, he said, why is it that I haven't seen you? And the young man, he looked at his mentor and he said, oh, it's just been so hard. Life has been so difficult, and I feel like I'm trying to figure out life by myself, and things are just not the way that I believe that they should be. So the mentor, without saying anything to the young man, he got up, he went to the fireplace, and he took the tongs, he took out a piece of burning coal, hot coal, and he put it down outside the fireplace, and he sat it by itself. And he sat there with the young man, and he said, young man, I want you to look at that burning coal. And for minutes, what turned into probably an hour or so, they watched that coal. And the mentor looked at the young man, and he said, son, he said, what is happening with that coal? And the young man looked back at the mentor, and he said, it's dying out. And the mentor looked at the young man, and he said, son, what would happen if the coal stayed close to the fire? And the young man looked back at the mentor and he said, it would still keep burning strong. This is a very important thing you have to learn about leadership. While the young man in this situation was learning from the mentor, he and himself finds himself in the shoes, and a lot of leaders that I know personally, even I myself have found myself in these shoes many times. We find ourselves in these shoes of the young man, that we grow so disheartened, we grow cold, we grow disenchanted, we grow disconnected, we get tired, we just feel like, oh, we're in this by ourselves, nobody else understands it about me, and we get burned out. Now, you have to remember something about being burnt out. When you're burnt out, that means that your intimacy, that your activity for God has trumped your intimacy with God. That means that you are doing more for God, in a sense, and I say for God with quotations. You're doing more for Him than the time that you're spending with Him. Meaning that you're working. You gotta travel over here to go for God. You gotta go preach this conference. You have to go and build this thing, and you got to go and sell this thing. I'm doing all these things for God, but I'm not spending the adequate time with Him. So you get burnt out. This is because you become the separated coal. You are now separated from the fire. The important thing that leaders have to realize is that in order for you to remain hot, you have to stay connected to the flames. Now, in one way, I do mean you have to stay connected to God. And when I say God, I'm talking about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That you have to make sure that you are remaining connected to Him, and that you are remaining connected you're remaining connected in prayer, that you are praying, you're remaining connected through the Word, through reading of the Word of God, and you also remain connected through fellowshipping with Him. And what I mean by that is in your everyday activity, and you're going in and you're going out, that you're remaining connected and you're doing ultimately what you're supposed to do, and having that communication time with Him. That prayer is not mitigated. It's not all just regulated to just a closet or just to a very specific time in devotion when you wake up in the morning. But prayer is something that you are constantly doing because you're in this constant communication with the Lord. Now, I found myself in times where I felt like I was a separated coal, that I was the guy. I felt so alone. I felt like nobody understood what I was going through. I felt like, you know what, nobody really can understand my pain, can understand my dilemma. And the biggest problem that I had was not that I was by myself, that nobody else understood. The biggest problem I had was that I was a separated coal. One thing I know is, as a pastor, that I need to be around other pastors. I need to be around people with like minds who understand my dilemma. One thing I remember years ago, I sat down with a pastor, and he was telling me this same thing. He was telling me how it was just so difficult for him, how it was so hard. And I said to him, well, who are your friends? And he began to talk to me about who his closest friends were. And his friends, albeit very nice guys, I would assume, they did not have the same type of like mind. This pastor was a young man, as I am. He was a young man. He was recently married, and he had already had 2 children. And I mean, this is a big deal. You need somebody with a like mind who understands their workload. His friends were single. They were employees at particular jobs. The pastor himself was self-employed. I mean, he was an entrepreneur. So there was a whole different mindset that goes along with that. I tell people all the time, it's very difficult for me to talk to a single man about my issues, because he doesn't understand them. I've had single friends before. I don't have many now, but I've had single friends before. I'm married with 2 kids, but I have single friends before, and they would say, "Well, why don't you just come and hang out? We can hang out on Saturday." And I say, "Well, I can't hang out on Saturday because Saturday's family day. We can hang out on Sunday." "Well, I can't do that because I have church. I'm a pastor. Why don't we just hang out after church?" Being a pastor, you would understand you don't just hang out after church, because after you get finished preaching, it's almost equivalent to working an 8-hour job. You have poured out your life to these people, and now afterwards you're listening to them and you're talking to them and you're in their life. It's a lot to do. It's a lot to undertake. It's not just, "Oh, I'm just there and I just had a good time and then boom, and that's it." I really poured out my life, and I really poured out myself to you. So it's a big project, and it's a big undertaking. So knowing I need to be around people and be around the right people is paramount. It is of the utmost of importance. One thing that I want you to really understand here as well is that being amongst a separated coal. If you're one of the separated coal, it means that you need to find a fellowship. You need to find somewhere where you can come together and you can be a part of some type of association, some type of fellowship, so that you don't feel alone. A lot of times as men, we like to chart our own path, don't we? We like to just create our own way. We'll chop down the trees and we'll head in the direction we want to go. But that is not always beneficial. You want to go in the area where you are supposed to go, how you're supposed to get there, when you're supposed to get there. So the important thing for you to do is making sure that you are still connected to the fire, that you don't become disconnected. And one final warning for pastors, those leaders out there who are pastors who are listening to this: do not think that your time of preaching about God can be compared to the time that you spend with Him. I know that you spend time possibly studying your sermons, or you spend time. I know what those hours feel like. As a pastor, I know what those hours and days feel like, just studying a sermon to get up and preach for 45 minutes that people walk in late for, and some people don't even care to remember. They don't remember the title of the sermon. I know what that feels like, man. I really, really do. But don't think that time that you spent preaching for God somehow should trump the time that you're going to spend with Him. If you do, you're going to burn out really quickly, and then you're going to make it all in the flesh, because you're going to have to be the one doing it, and it's not going to be of the Spirit. So you have to make sure that you're not becoming one of the separated coal as well. One of the biggest pieces of leadership, and I'll end this here, one of the biggest pieces of leadership is knowing that just because I'm the leader does not mean I need to be by myself. Yes, God does place leaders in the valleys to shape them. Yes, He does place them on top of the mountaintop to test them. However, one thing that God is not going to do is separate you where you're all by yourself, and then you can burn, and then the fire and the flame that you have can burn out. That even if there may not be a human next to you, He's with you. And He wants you to know, as well as I, that being by yourself and being separated is not something that's going to be advantageous for you. Do not be the separated coal. God bless you. Thank you so much for tuning in to Real Life with Cornelius Lindsay. Hey, if you get an opportunity, please check out my website, www.corneliuslindsay.com. Until next time, remember, Jesus is Lord. God bless you.